Okay, so I went through and I read my document the first time just to read it through, and then I went back through and I read it again the second time. And now what I'm going to do is start putting together my annotation. And so what I want to do, remember you want to start your annotated my annotated bibliography. And remember you want to start your annotated bibliography with your citation. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this Works Cited from the page that I was sent from Points of View Database Reference Center, and I'm going to start open a new blank document, and I'm going to paste that in here, and I'll get rid of the highlighting here, and there I go. So, and again, I know I'm going to have to play around with this a little bit, but at least I've got that down for now. Now, just as a reminder to myself, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can find my sticky. Here it is. And let me get rid of these other stickies if I can. Oops. Hold on, let me see if I can find that other one. I just want the one. I think it's this one. Yeah. Okay, oops. Well, I'm not sure if I can pull that up. Maybe it's right there. No, it's not that one. Anyhow, I'm going to see if I can find that. So let me see if I can take a minute here and find it. It's this one. So I don't want this one. I just want this one. I'll just put these here so that I have them handy. I'm going to format my shape and make the layout tight so that I can move it around. All right. Okay, so I just went ahead and I just created a text box with those 6 items in it, because remember, this is what I want to keep in mind. I want to include these items in my these components in my annotated bibliography. So now let me go back to my document. I'm just going to minimize this, and I've identified the main point. Now this main point, this is not in my own words, and I want to make sure when I write my annotated bibliography that I'm using my own words. But for now, I'm just going to paste this here and use it as a note and know that I have my main point identified, right? So I've done this one right here. Oops, I've done that. Oops, hang on. So I have my main point. Now the writer's credentials, I think I'm going to go ahead and go in order just to make sure I have all my bases covered. So the writer's credentials, when I read through this whole document, I noticed down at the bottom, as is typical, there's some information on the writer. On the writers, actually just one of the writers, and that's Heather Newton. And I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this. Now, this other writer, Micah Isaac, I recognize his name just because he's written a lot of points of view, and especially points of view database articles. And if you remember from when you listened to the Points of View Reference Center tutorial, we learned that the people who tend to author the articles in the Points of View Reference Center database are professionals or subject matter experts. And in this case, Micah Islet he's a professional. He's a professional writer, and he contributes a lot of articles to the database. So there's not a lot of information about him, although I know that and I can include that in the section here where I'm going to list the writer's credentials. We do have a lot of information about the co-author, Heather Newton, and again, I'm going to read through that and I'll put that information in my own words, but at least I have it here. Okay, the other thing I'm looking for is an understanding of the main point. And now an annotated bibliography is concise, but I want to include a few details. And the nice thing about the article that I read is that the details are highlighted, or it's really it's easy to pick them out because of the headings here. So I learned about the history of the exploitation of animals. I don't know that I'll want to include a lot of that in my annotated bibliography, but I might. There's a discussion here about the difference between the term animal welfare and the term animal rights, and I may or may not want to mention that. Although this I think is important, and that is that animal rights laws seek to protect animals from stress, emotional suffering, physical harm, where animal welfare laws protect animals from suffering, but they don't necessarily protect animals from human exploitation. So that's just one of the things I learned as I read the article. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this, and I'm going to put this down here with to include as support. In other words, why do these folks believe that ethical principles and legal statutes should protect the rights of animals? Well, one of the reasons they do is because, well, just one of the things we need to understand as part of that point of view is just what an animal rights law is. Okay, let me go back here and go back to my document. And now I'm getting into kind of the heart of the discussion here. You know, why is it that these folks believe that animal rights should be protected? Well, there are basically three reasons, and that's what I found in this section here. And those three reasons are that moral principles, our own moral principles, should guide us in terms of our wanting to protect not only human rights but also animal rights. Another argument, or another detail that they use to support their argument, is that animals are sensory creatures and that they're able to experience pain and they're able to experience emotion, basically, is what they're arguing. And also, the utilitarian argument is that we don't necessarily have a need for animals the way we used to. And therefore, we shouldn't exploit them maybe the way they used to, because we no longer have a need for animals as a primary food source. And we no longer have a need for animals in terms of using them for labor. We're able to use machines for labor. So these 3 points I want to include. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste these items in my document. And I would say those are items number 1, 2, and 3. Those are the 3 most important details to include. And again, I'm putting these here not because I want to plagiarize. I'm not going to use these word for word, but just as reminders. I'm just pulling notes from my document to help me remember those 3 points. Let's see, I'll go ahead and get this one. And maybe provide a little more detail. Grab a little bit more. Oops, there in a second. And here's a little bit more. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and highlight these guys a little bit of a different color, just so I know. Let's see if I can find kind of a softer color. Oh, it's not so soft, but just so I know that those are just some of my details. So I have the writer's credentials. I know the main point the writers are making. And I have some details to support that point. In terms of, do they mention that any kind of relationship with other works? And they do. So if I go through here, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. And these are just some more. This is just some more information that I would probably use in my paper if I decide to use the source for my paper, my essay, but maybe not for my annotated bibliography. And here's a section. Oh, I thought I highlighted it. But there's a section here where the writers discuss other works that support this point of view. And that is the work here by these folks, this cognitive expert and then a psychologist. who have written about the intellectual and emotional capacity of animals and use that information to raise awareness. So I'm going to copy that and put that over here too, because it just is an indication, or just an example of a reference made to other works. Now, in terms of the writer's bias or standpoint, sometimes this is a little tricky to figure out. I know because I've read other articles by Micah Islet that he doesn't necessarily have a bias that he's going to state. He tries to objectively share information about a wide range of controversial topics. And I don't know about Heather Newton in terms of a bias based on her background, other than she has a background in law, and that information is all right here. So what I'm looking for then in the text is I want to pay attention to anything that might indicate to me a bias, or help me better understand why the writers take the perspective that they do on animal rights. And there's not a lot here that I found, other than perhaps I could include that I think a bias might be that our author, Heather Newton, is viewing this topic through the lens of the law, because that's her background. And so I'm just going to mention Newton's background in law, because this article or this argument does have this legal stance. It's approaching animal rights ethically, and then also approaching animal rights legally. And so I'm probably gonna mention something about that legal lens in my annotated bibliography. The audience. Now, the audience, folks, sometimes the audience is a parent and sometimes not. Sometimes the writer mentions the audience in the writing. In this case, the audience is just, this article was written for the Points of View Reference Center. And so in terms of audience, the audience, see if I can type and talk, would just be readers of the Points of View database. Now, I might want to think a little bit more about who those readers are. Chances are they're college students. Chances are they may just be people who are wanting to be informed on controversial topics. Maybe for work, maybe for government. They have a government role. I don't know, but chances are, I would just say they're readers. This is pretty general, but readers of the Points of View database. And then in terms of my summary comment, what I want to do here is I want to make an evaluation about the article, and I want to make a determination about whether or not for whom might this article be helpful. Is it helpful for me? Is it helpful for the purposes of my writing this essay? And I would say, based on what I've read here, it is. There's enough here for me to use for this paper. Their point is clearly stated. The authors support their points with using details. And so when I write up that part, that summary comment part, I'm just going to make a statement, a sentence or two perhaps, about that, and just say that for students who are working on a controversial topic paper, to either find common ground or to explain opposing viewpoints, that this article might be helpful. And that might be all I include as a summary comment. Now, just another tip here, folks, before we close it. Again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these notes and I'm going to use them to, in my own words, write my annotated bibliography. I'm going to include this, my source information. I'm going to tidy it up a little bit by comparing it with what I know is correct MLA style format. And I'll use the OWL Reference Center, the OWL Purdue University's online writing lab is my reference. And then in the next step here, I'll show you what I come up with. But again, I'm not going to plagiarize. I'm not going to just cut and paste this into my annotated bibliography. I'm going to read through my notes, put my notes aside, and then write a paragraph that touches on those 6 points and provide some information about my source.